What is up, all my dorks, nerds, geeks, and gamers? It's your host Ghost here. And last few weeks, we did we've been catching up with the Amazing Spider-Man comic book storyline here on Wet Ink. We're going to continue on with that. Last time we did issues 65 and 66. Today we're looking at issues 67 and 68. And the other thing is the issues 65 and 66 were the end of the King's Ransom storyline that they had set up. But we really didn't get any conclusive endings in that storyline. Excuse me. So I feel like they're definitely building multiple storylines on top of this one. And then the Sinister War, I believe, is going to be when they start delivering answers and start questioning and figuring out where all these storylines fit in the grander scheme of things. But right after King's Ransom and before we get to the Sinister War, they started a brand new storyline called The Chameleon Conspiracy. We got issue 1 and issue 2 here that we're going to be talking about here on Wet Ink. But yeah, this storyline is more of a personal storyline for Spider-Man because it deals with his sister, who is a secret agent. I don't know when all this happened. This is after I quit reading comic books. Apparently, Teresa Parker is Peter Parker's sister. She is the daughter of the two Parker parents who are spies for whatnot, so they have ties to Chameleon and some underground killings and things like that, and Kingpin and everything else that goes on. So they have a history rich on their own without adding Spider-Man to the mix on top of it. But yeah, let's hop right into issue 1 of the Chameleon Conspiracy and issue 2, and then let's talk about it. So here we go. So we start off with Teresa Parker breaking into what they call the hiding place. It's a Soviet prison for the most part, where they capture, they keep terrorists and criminals, and the worst of the worst people go here. She's tracking someone down, and we don't know who this is. We very quickly find out that she is looking for Chameleon for some sort of role he played in starting this big war with everything else going on in New York. But she shows up right away, and she's not playing. She finds him and pulls her gun out, and first thing she does is pop around in him. And let's just say he's not too happy about that, but he's been shot before. At the same time, on another storyline, we got Betty Brant, who has had affairs with Ned in the past, who is Peter's ex-best friend, along with Harry and a bunch of other ex-friends. But Betty Brant is pregnant. The only problem is Ned has been dead for a long time, but when they had the Clone Saga, there was a bunch of clone Neds who were out there, so she could have gotten pregnant from one of the clone Neds, but unfortunately the clone Ned died as well, because of Spider-Man's meddling and stuff like that. So once Peter finds out that Betty Brant is back in town and she's pregnant with Ned's baby, he becomes a little sick because he's the one that didn't tell her that Ned shouldn't be alive and that he had something to do with Ned's death. He never explained any of that to her. He doesn't believe that he's still alive, so he just runs out of there, throws on his suit, and he's just not dealing with it. So he hops on to town. He remembers what happened to Ned as a clone and how he couldn't save him then. So he's still a little bit confused on how Betty's pregnant and how it ties into this. Then we cut back to Chameleon, who just got shot in the shoulder, and he's like, "You shot me again." And then Teresa Parker says, "Third time's a charm," and gives him a nice punch to the gut. So he's not doing too well, and he's still playing with her head, still messing with her mind, saying, "I did this, I did that, I set up this, you walked into that." So he's antagonizing her. I don't think it really is going anywhere. I think that she's being a little bit lax, and I'm sure she's beating him up and she's torturing him pretty badly here. But if he was talking that much junk to me, then I would have probably did a lot worse than she did. So then we cut back to Empire State University. So when Peter ran away from Betty Brant, he went to the Empire State University to work on this machine called the Clairvoyant, which can supposedly tell you the future a few days in advance, 2 days, 3 days, or whatever. But him and his partner are not getting along with it when they're working on it. That's because we find out that his partner is actually in debt with some bad people. He's been using the Clairvoyant to gamble, and he's finally hit a losing streak where he can't explain away the losses, and he has to actually start paying. So then the supervillains come to make him pay up, and of course Peter Parker knows nothing of this. This guy's kept it a secret. It's kind of been his own personal demons he's been dealing with, but now it's getting out of hand. He's got some bad people after him, and not only that, on top of all of that, the foreigner who is after our character, the Clairvoyant creator, who is using it to gamble, who is now in debt with the bad guys, is dating Silver Sable. So Silver Sable is a spy, much like Black Widow, but even more ruthless, if you could imagine. So yeah, she's also tied into this. This guy's trying to get his money, and the kid tells him, well, the clairvoyant will work eventually. I just need a stronger power source. And he says, well, we got you. We can make a heist. We can get this power source for you. But the clairvoyant, we use it to make money. And he's like, okay, sounds good. We get the power source. We'll make it work. We'll make it all work. We cut back to the chameleon, who is still being held point, and he's still taunting Teresa Parker. He's like, you'll never get the answers if you kill me. You're so close, yet you're so far. Just really playing up the situation. Cut back to Spider-Man, who decides to check in on Betty Brant again. So he shows up to check in on her and to explain what happened to Ned and all that. And just then, Ned is there, alive and well, standing in front of him. And it's blowing Spider-Man away because he has no idea how. He doesn't understand how, but he's just happy for Betty and Ned. So he doesn't say much about it. It's just strange, and he's happy for him. Cut back to Chameleon and Teresa Parker, where Chameleon tells her, you know what? Okay, I'm going to start giving you answers, but we're going to meet the guy who killed your parents, and that is the Finisher. I really don't know much about him. I've never really followed the Ben and Mary Parker storyline, or whatever their names are, their parents, when they were spies and all that, because it's so convoluted and it's been changed so many times in Marvel history. That I just never bothered with Peter's parents. I was always more of a Peter Parker fan and what he was doing with his life as Spider-Man and how it plays in the greater Marvel universe of comics. But yeah, so we meet the Finisher at the very end here, setting up a little bit of a sinister meeting between the two. And that is the end of issue 1 of the Chameleon Conspiracy. But we cut back to the start of the Sinister War, because if you remember at the end of the King's Bounty comic, we had Doc Ock waking up from the dead, and they told him, you know what, you're gonna need some friends to help you out here. So he's waking up from the dead. He remembers he was Otto Octavius. He remembers the Superior Spider-Man storyline and everything he's done as Spider-Man, as Doc Ock, as a scientist, as everything. It's all starting to come back to him. And now we get a little glimpse of actually who's behind all of these storylines, because like I said, these are all just smaller steps building up to a bigger story. And I believe Mephisto is one of the bigger villains here, setting up the Sinister War. And it's like they said at the beginning of the King's Bounty storyline. This is a war for Peter Parker's soul. It's about what he stands for and who he is as a character. And I really like what they're setting up here with issue 1. So let's hop into part 2 of the Chameleon Conspiracy and see what's been going on in that issue. Alright, so we cut with Teresa Parker, who is meeting the Finisher, and he's going over some backstory about how he killed his parents and all that. And then they introduce her into who's actually running the show, and then it cuts away. We get no answers on who this guy is, what he knows, how he's going to help them or not help them. We have no idea. Cut back to Ned and Betty, and they're kind of trying to give Spider-Man an explanation about what happened. He says that once he was the Hobgoblin, because yes, we know that Ned was the Hobgoblin after his family died and he turned on Spider-Man. He ended up going, before he died, he ended up going to Oscorp, drinking every single bit of the Hobgoblin serum, or the Green Goblin serum, whatever one you prefer to call it. And he says, just like Norman Osborn, whenever he dies, his heart eventually will restart, even if it's slow, and he will come back alive. So that's supposedly what he's telling Betty. That's what happened. Spider-Man's not necessarily believing it. Yeah, that's the storyline. And Betty's saying how she met him, that she had a message over the internet. They met up, and she realized, oh my God, it's Ned. He's not dead. He's still alive. And it's the same person that I fell in love with way back then. So she gives her story of what happened. Ned gives his story of what happened. And they bring up the clairvoyant, and Peter's like, oh my God, I got to go work on the clairvoyant. So he changes into his costume, and he heads out to help his friend out on working on this machine. But his friend is already stuck with the bad guys, Kurt Connors especially, who is helping him work on the clairvoyant in the meantime, because they got to break into this lab with the bad guys and steal this power supply. And then we have Slide who shows up, who I love Slide. He's just a character who's so minuscule in the Spider-Man mythos. He's such a small B-tier villain. He's good at sliding into things. He can get through small cracks. He slides into stuff. He can slide, he can roll, that's all he does. That's why his name's Slide. But we also get this like nice little shot here on the side. This little panel of him going into the air ducts and then working his way down and then all the way through and out. So yeah, a little cool little illustration there to get to the power supply they're trying to steal. And if you're wondering how are they going to steal this giant power supply, well, it's actually pretty easy. They just throw in a one of those micro things from Ant-Man. They throw it in, shrink the machine down, throw in a replacement, and then enlarge it so it seems like nothing left in the first place. But then Spider-Man finds out someone's trying to break into this place and steal this power supply. He has no idea his friend's attached to it. He just thinks it's the villains. So he goes in, he confronts Connors, he confronts Slide, and he's ready to fight them both. And then just then the wall explodes and even more villains are there with an army of, it looks like jack-o'-lanterns or hobgoblin type enemies behind these two villains here. And it says to be continued. So very shorter issue compared to the last one. But a lot does happen. Mostly the backstory of Ned and Betty, what's happening with them supposedly. Not a whole lot of action because this issue actually cuts off before the action starts. So it's actually a very good cliffhanger setup issue. So yeah, definitely looking forward to the Chameleon Conspiracy issue 3. But once again, before we're done there, we have more setup for the Sinister War. Cut back to Otto Octavius, who is talking to himself on the beach. Just then the sand comes up and starts responding to him. And we find out that it is Sandman. And now Sandman is a part of the Sinister War, ready to take on Spider-Man along with Otto Octavius. So, that was 2 issues of the Chameleon Conspiracy, the new Amazing Spider-Man storyline going on right now. I'm not sure how many more issues I don't know if this is a 3-part storyline, but I do know this ties heavily into the King's Gambit storyline, along with the Sinister War storyline, and a couple of other storylines that are all running concurrently. And I'm waiting for the point when they all intersect and we start getting answers to everything, and it starts to answer about what's going on here and there. Definitely looking forward to it. Let me know down below what you guys thought of the Chameleon Conspiracy issue 1 or 2. Make sure you like, subscribe, or share. And as always, guys, keep it right here on Dorkston. I've been your host, Ghost. Adios.